On April 5, 1999, a man named Robert, accompanied by his brother and a friend, spent the night camping near a cave called Hermit Cave. Their purpose was to engage in outdoor activities and try caving for the first time. Hermit Cave is situated somewhere in the Woodland Park area near Fort Gibson Lake in Oklahoma, but its precise location remains unknown. Given the outcome of the story, it's perhaps fortunate that the cave isn't more widely known. Following a night of camping, the friend accompanying Robert and his brother departed for work. However, Robert and his brother opted to explore further. Despite being inexperienced in caving, Robert was eager to venture into Hermit Cave. Unfortunately, his lack of experience meant he was ill-prepared, wearing only jeans and a t-shirt, and equipped with just one flashlight and no protective gear. He was likely unaware of the cave's poor air quality resulting from inadequate ventilation. As Robert and his brother pressed on through the narrow passages of the cave, the confines grew tighter with each step. Eventually, they encountered a side passage that seemed to narrow even further. Undeterred, Robert ventured ahead, inching deeper into the cramped space. However, as he progressed, the passage constricted to an alarming degree, making it increasingly difficult for him to draw a full breath. At around 150 feet into the tunnel, Robert encountered a particularly tight squeeze, the smallest they had encountered so far. Despite the daunting challenge, Robert looked ahead. He noticed that the tunnel appeared to angle downward beyond the restriction before widening once more. Robert made the decision to attempt to squeeze it through. He initially pushed himself forward, arms by his sides, feeling the tunnel's increasing pressure. Robert struggled to a halt before realizing he was completely trapped. He couldn't move forward because it was too tight, and his arms locked to his sides prevented him from having enough leverage to push backward. To make matters worse, he was trapped in the cave, his face directly above the muddy, wet floor of the cave. After trying desperately to free himself with no luck, his brother tried as well, but either couldn't reach him or just couldn't pull him out. So with no other options, his brother was forced to leave to go get help, leaving Robert in this inverted position. Rescue teams and paramedics rushed towards the scene. Over the next several hours, the rescue operation took place diligently, removing dirt and rocks to widen the area enough to reach Robert to get him out. While the entire team was working on this rescue mission, it was necessary to continuously pump air into the cave because of how bad the air quality was inside. On top of that, even the thinnest paramedic to enter the cave was unable to take full breaths until reaching the restriction. Finally, they reached Robert at 3 p.m., 5 hours after he became stuck. Unfortunately, the poor guy was no more. He was face down in the mud and appeared to have passed away from suffocation. His body was finally extracted from the cave, although it's unclear whether he passed out due to the deteriorating air quality or just couldn't keep himself up anymore in the dirt. In June of 1967, a group of 10 cavers ventured into Mosdale Cave for exploration and to help map out some unknown passages within the cave. Leading the pack were Dave and Jeff, two highly experienced cavers. Mosdale was no walk in the park. It required lots of crawling and squeezing through tight spots. The group went in, and after spending a few hours in the depths of the cave, 4 members, including Dave's fiancée Morag, decided to head back, exiting the cave around 5 in the evening. Meanwhile, Dave, Jeff, and 4 others kept on going deeper into the cave, carrying their equipment and marking sections. Among them was 17-year-old Michael Ryan, the youngest of the bunch. Picture crawling through Far Marathon, a super narrow tunnel, about the size of a regular microwave, and just 1.5 feet tall by 1 foot wide. Once you start, there's no turning back, so you've got to commit to crawling forward for at least an hour. There's a bit of water flowing along the bottom, making the journey even trickier. Just imagine squeezing through, unable to spread your arms or turn back, with only a small break spot in between 2 long stretches of crawling. Just imagining it can cause one to suffocate. As the group neared the final stretch of Far Marathon, the passage narrowed even more, requiring a determined push to make it through. Their aim was to access the next section of the cave system and continue clearing passages for mapping purposes. At that moment, Morag returned to the cave entrance to check if the explorers were wrapping up their expedition. However, she observed no indication of their imminent emergence. While rain began to fall outside, underground, it wasn't cause for immediate concern. The team focused on their task of clearing passages, but they couldn't help but notice the slight increase in stream flow and the rising groundwater levels. Though it caught their attention, it didn't necessarily ring alarm bells regarding the safety of their mission. At a certain point, the water levels began to cause concern. The men could hear the increasing flow of water and feel it rising around their feet. Knowing they were a 3-hour trek from the entrance, they decided to call it a day and halt their work. With Dave's intimate knowledge of the cave system, they trusted he'd lead them out safely. However, they were unaware of the impending doom. Morag made one final trip to the cave entrance around 9, only to be met with a horrifying sight. A lake of water had formed, blocking access to the cave system entirely. Fully submerged and inaccessible, panic set in as she raced 3 miles to seek help. As the men retraced their steps up the far marathon passage, they encountered rising water levels. Forced to ascend to a higher chamber, the cramped conditions likely induced panic. Despite the daunting challenge of navigating through the rushing water, their experience guided them to maintain composure and move swiftly towards the hope of emerging in a safer space. Leading the way, young Michael and seasoned Jeff bravely forged ahead, squeezing through the narrow passage to begin their return journey. In certain sections of this passage, squeezing through was a monumental task. The cavers had to contort their bodies, maneuvering past rocks with sheer arm strength. With rubber boots scraping against the sides, they propelled themselves forward as quickly as possible. However, this time, they were met with a new challenge as the water surged directly towards them instead of trailing behind. Jeff Barrow, familiar with the cave's water dynamics, likely understood the urgency of the situation. With a swift effort, he and Michael aimed to navigate Far Marathon and reach the safer, larger chamber above. Meanwhile, the other 4 men readied themselves, gathering gear and bracing for their own passage through Far Marathon. As the water flow intensified, Dave Adamson remained confident in his ability to navigate through the storm's flash flood. With determination, the experienced cavers hastened their pace, mindful of the growing danger. Jeff and Michael found themselves struggling against the rising floodwaters in the narrow passage, which soon surpassed their hands and shoulders. Desperate, they sought out any available crack in the passage to lift their faces above the rushing water. In the midst of uncertainty, Michael likely turned to Jeff, seeking guidance on their next move. The influx of water flooding into the narrow passage showed no signs of relenting, leaving no safe escape route. The grim reality set in as David led the others deeper into the cramped tunnel, hoping to outpace the rising water. Yet, as they progressed through Far Marathon, they confronted the same dire circumstances that befell their companions. The water levels soared, leaving them no choice but to strive to lift their faces above the surging tide, seeking any sliver of air. John Ogden, likely the last in line, heard the desperate pleas of his friends to retreat. Recognizing the futility of pressing forward, he utilized his strength to maneuver his body backward, desperately clinging to hope. With each passing moment, the looming threat of complete submersion grew imminent. In an attempt to save himself, he shoved his body into a tiny opening above and prayed for a moment's escape from the rushing water. In the desperate struggle for survival, he squeezed his body and face into the little opening, even though it was too small, holding out for one more breath. Outside the cave, a comprehensive rescue operation swung into action. It was evident that the cave entrance lay submerged beneath a lake of water, yet optimism lingered that the men had found sanctuary within a secure chamber, awaiting the receding of water levels. With unwavering determination, rescue teams mobilized, rallying hundreds of volunteers to dam off the entrance and deploy pumps to alleviate the inundation, facilitating the gradual reduction of water levels within the cave and paving the way for safe passage. By Sunday afternoon, a full day after the men ventured into the cave, rescuers managed to reach Far Marathon. Shouting into the depths, they hoped to signal the men that the passage was now clear, encouraging their descent from the elevated chamber. However, the grim truth emerged when 2 sets of legs were spotted protruding from the ridge of the tunnel. These bodies belonged to Jeff and Michael, who had elevated themselves in a desperate bid for precious air. Subsequently, the somber discovery of the remaining 5 men's bodies unfolded, each revealing the tragic outcome of the relentless floodwaters. It would be another 2 days before John Ogden's body was located, his determined struggle evident in the contorted position within the overhead crack. All 6 men succumbed to the overwhelming deluge, trapped within the unforgiving depths of the flooded cavern. Following this harrowing ordeal, the cave was sealed, serving as the eternal resting place for the fallen explorers.
Before becoming a popular destination for tourists and scientists on the guideline for their collective safety before they proceeded deeper into the cave. However, Peter, seemingly driven by his own impulses, disregarded his friend's instructions and ventured away from the guideline once again, exploring another passage to the group's left just minutes later. Although he promptly returned, his actions were cause for concern. Despite their shared understanding of the rules, his friends reiterated the importance of adhering to them as they pressed onward into the cave, with Peter taking the lead on the guideline once more. Peter's final departure from the guideline occurred during his 3rd excursion. As the 2 men observed him veering down a narrower passage to their right, his light gradually dimmed until it vanished completely around the corner. That marked the last sighting of Peter. The passage he had chosen turned out to be a labyrinth of dead ends, leaving him lost, isolated, and with no means of escape. Realizing he had depleted most of his gas supply while searching for a route back to the main guideline, Peter found himself in a stroke of luck when he stumbled upon one of the previously mentioned underwater lakes. Stranded on an island deep within the cave, hundreds of feet below the Earth's surface, he found some solace in the knowledge that drowning was not an immediate threat. However, with his tank now empty, his sole recourse was to await rescue, hoping it would soon be underway. Peter's dive companions ventured into the passage after noticing his prolonged absence, but their search proved futile, as they weren't aware he should have surfaced by then. Exhausted, Peter waited for hours until fatigue overcame him, and he drifted into an uneasy slumber, only to awaken believing it was the following day. Intended to explore that fateful day. To this day, the depth of the lake within Milner Hall remains unknown. Although this incident occurred in the mid-80s, it served as a stark reminder of the importance of adhering to diving protocols and safety regulations, particularly in the realm of cave diving. Stories like Peter's have underscored the vital significance of following the established guidelines for cave diving worldwide. Disregarding these rules is tantamount to inviting disaster, and should be avoided by all who venture beneath the water's surface. Whether Peter failed to appreciate the inherent risks of his chosen hobby, or simply disregarded them, the outcome stands as a sobering testament to the unforgiving reality of cave diving.